Presentation, I did want to remind everybody there is a short survey. I have a paper copy. We'll be passing those out at the end of the day, and there's an online version. So please remember to take those. They're super short. It should only take 5 minutes or so, but give us good feedback on what went well and for next year, what presentations you'd like or what future presentations that we haven't had. We want to hear all your ideas.
I think we're actually going to be
Okay, we are now at 8:30, so we are going to start the emergency preparedness disaster preparedness presentation. So this is disaster preparedness for everyone. We want to make sure that everyone here in their own home, their family prepared, you work with an agency, you want to make sure their staff is prepared, and we'll start off with introduction to Lanny Monson, our Governance Council on Disabilities and Special Education. Good morning, everybody. Whoa.
I'm Wright with the HE Disability Resource Center here in Anchorage.
My name is Richard. I work for CHG as a disability advisor, but I'm also a volunteer at the Red Cross as a disability services associate.
And we also will be having another analyst, Bridget from the Red Cross, joining us shortly. So when we think about disability in Alaska, I'm trying to think next
sorry.
Okay.
Is it not?
Okay, so when we think about disability in Alaska, almost 1 in 4 Alaskan adults report having one or more disabilities. And when we look at disasters, we have seen that a lot of times elderly and as well as people with disabilities are more affected. During some of the big disasters, elderly have a tough time as well as do people with mobility problems. So we really want to make sure that people with disabilities as well as the elderly are prepared for disasters so that they already have different programs. Okay, I can hear some sort of feedback. Is that me? I'm going to give that a second. Okay, now it's quiet. Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. I guess I listen to myself talk when I'm, or think while I'm talking. So we really want to make sure that seniors, the elderly, as well as people with disabilities are prepared. So if a disaster happens, that they are ready, they're able to shelter in place, they have their medications, their go babes ready to go, and they'll be less impacted. So right there, disasters affect everybody. Each of us should plan based on our own needs. We can all benefit from working with the group to identify and plan for our needs. We want to think about our own personal situations and plan with the team to stay safe. And it's more important than ever to be prepared.
So when we talk about being prepared for disasters, you need to think about the individual, family, your own family. Pardon me. If you work in an assisted living facility or a different type of facility where you're a caregiver, the individuals, the staff, and the preparedness, we take an overview. So what we're going to discuss is making a plan, getting a kit, and staying informed. All three of these are extremely important in regards to making sure that you're completely prepared as much as you can be, because what is the joke? You can plan, but plans always change. But it's better to have a plan A than no plan at all. What is usually in a plan is who to contact, what is needed in your plan, and that means we're going to discuss kits for you to have, for you to be prepared, whether you're at home, at work, in your vehicle, where you need to go if you cannot shelter in place, and how you should get there, or the availability of transportation on how to get there. What if you experience a disability? These are some of the topics that you need to look into prior to a disability, prior to disaster. So that would be transportation options, because your options that you have now may not be available during a disaster. List of medications, how much you take, how often, what pharmacy, the information. So if you do have to relocate to a shelter and you're unable to take your medications with you, how can you get them? A list of your medical equipment and supplies. And also, if you have a service animal, information on your service animal. And we're going to be getting a little bit more detail on some of this information, so bear with us. So we actually have the newly updated Get Ready Toolkit, which is Alaska's Emergency Preparedness Toolkit for people with disabilities. We'll put these out on the table. I have more on the Council's table of what this is. Alaska specific. It's in plain language. It has a large font. So this is something that will help you make a plan. Goes through all the different items you would need in your kit as well. And then, what's different about this toolkit? This toolkit offers strength-based format, talks about the different kinds of emergencies in Alaska, information for different disabilities, information on individual needs, building a personal support network, and tools for sheltering in place and for evacuation. So while this is Alaska's toolkit for people with disabilities, people without disabilities can use this toolkit as well. It will go through all the information everybody needs, but it has additional things for people with disabilities as well. So in the toolkit, I'm sorry, I have 5 kids. I think I'm just used to yelling, even though they're all adults now. We have, in the toolkit, you'll notice if you are excited and want to look through it, a section for making a plan. And the sections, as you can see, are about personal ability plan, building a personal support network, my personal support network, my neighbor contact list, my emergency telephone list, and my medicine list. If you use this book and this toolkit as a true tool in order for you to have all this information located in one place, when a disaster occurs and you have that toolkit filled out, you're not going to have to be reactive and try to recall all your information, especially at that time when your emotions are extremely high and you're very nervous and you don't know, and everybody is like this to a degree. The last thing you need to be doing is going, oh my gosh, what is somebody's phone number? Because guess what? We don't remember phone numbers now because we have our cell phones. But if you don't have your cell phone with you or it's not charged, you have it in your book, so it's written down. So it's really important that you use this book for exactly what it is, a tool. The strength-based planning, personal ability plan, abilities today, and help needed in an emergency. And you can see that the basic needs for making a plan is communication. Because whatever you put down in your book is going to be the communication that you're relaying to others if you're saying, oh, well, this is the information, or I need to talk to so-and-so. Hopefully you have filled this information out so people can assist you if need be. Also, your daily living. What is your typical daily living like? What is your routine? When you take your medications, do you have certain things that you need to do on a daily basis? Utilities. Who are the utility companies? What are your account numbers? If you have to contact the utility company, because all of a sudden you may not be able just to call the regular phone number and get an individual. They're probably going to have messages, but they may ask you questions. Or you may have accessibility, maybe, to your computer, and you can look things up there. If you do not have the account numbers and all, it will be difficult for you to do that at that time. How are you going to get around? Which is, again, the transportation. Evacuating. What constitutes you evacuating from where you are? You know, is it have a plan? Excuse me, have a plan about, you know, when you're going to evacuate, why you're evacuating, who's going to help you evacuate, are you able to evacuate on your own? And again, service animals, huge situation with not having the correct information for your service animals, and also having the things that you would need for your service animals to also be taken care of. I'm just going to add a little bit to that. So when you're filling this out, some people, you know, when in a steady state, when a disaster is not happening, you could, for instance, be in a wheelchair and your abilities in your own home aren't going to be affected. You might already have ramps, you might have push buttons that will open the doors automatically, those kind of things. But if during a disaster you have to go to a shelter or somebody's friend's house, or your friend's house, family member's house, you might need more help. You might need more help opening doors because those things that happen in our own home aren't in the new area. Or suppose you have, in a steady state, you know, you don't have anxiety, but during a disaster where things might be scary, somebody might need more help. They might need somebody to help them remember to do things, or might need to take anti-anxiety medication, those kind of things. So this goes through and talks about, hey, right now, what is your steady state, what help do you need, but during a disaster, things are a little bit different. Think about thinking ahead, what additional things you can do as well.
Hi everyone, sorry I was late. It's a little crazy with the Western storms. My name is Bridget and I'm the Community Disaster Program Manager with Red Cross Municipality.
All right, moving on now, tips for caregivers. So how to help with planning and response. Well, first is understanding what may be expected and required to do. And then ensuring you've received training in first aid and CPR. Knowing how, and also knowing how to provide additional emotional and behavioral supports, along with having current pictures of the person you're caring for. And going more in depth in that right there, understanding what you may be expected and required to do. It means to assist someone, use support, including helping to develop their plan, prepare their disaster support supplies, and documents, sign them up for local registries and support their evacuation, etc. And then ensuring they receive training in first aid and CPR, which means have to ensure or operate their assistive devices or medical equipment and how to support their personal care needs. And then knowing how to teach others to communicate effectively, which means with the person you care for, who may require hearing, visual, speech, or other communication adaptations. And then knowing how to provide additional emotional behavioral support, which is very important in these disasters, especially to help a person who is dealing with dementia or active mental health issues. And this could just be talking to supervisor, expedition support, training. And then having a current picture of the person you're caring for in cases you get separated, a copy of their essential medical records and treatment information, access the right care, if it may be helpful to discuss getting.
So, get away from the speaker. So we're going to talk a little bit about evacuations. So, depending on the needs, even if your house is safe, you may need to plan for evacuation. For example, if you don't have electricity, the power's out, or the heating's out, is it still safe for you to stay in your home? Is it still safe for all the family members to stay in your home? So when you're thinking about planning for evacuation, you want to think about where you will go. You want to think about how you will get there. Do you have a car that can handle a wheelchair or any other special equipment that needs to be transported? Who will help you? Do you have neighbors, friends, caregivers that can help with getting medical supplies together and transportation? What do you need to bring? You want to make sure you bring things that you absolutely need to survive, because if it's a major emergency and pharmacies are out or things like that, it might be harder to get replacement equipment. How will you maintain any care you need at the place you will go? So if you have an at-home caregiver, are they able to go to your friend's house that you're going to be staying at? How will you maintain vital medical care while away? So being in touch with your doctor, are you still able to send emergency prescriptions if you lose something, or is there someone else that you need to talk to about that? If you evacuate, consider what medical caregivers you may need at that location and add them to your contact list. So add them to your emergency plan. Plan for the help you may need and what to bring with you. If you have pets or assistance animals, plan to bring all of their equipment with. If you go to a disaster shelter, we're going to be talking a little bit about that a little bit later, and then know how to receive alerts about evacuations. So a lot of people think that there's someone knocking on their door telling them that they have to leave. A lot of times there's not time for that emergency. So how do we get those notifications to know that you have to leave? So things to keep in mind.
So here's a little tiny little exercise. How many of you know more than 3 people in your life? Raise your hand. How many of you have 3 people that you feel comfortable with being your personal support network? Then you need to let them know that you plan on them being in your personal support network, because nobody likes a surprise, right? Most of the time it is going to be a relative or a really good friend, or possibly someone you work with or works with you. But it's really very important that you let that person know that you have listed them in case of an emergency and to make sure they're comfortable with that. You also need to have their contact information. You need a copy of your personal plans, emergency paperwork. That emergency paperwork could be depending on what your needs are. But if you're living independently in your home, how many have a copy of your insurance policy to your home? How many have your information to your personal insurance? And as Red Cross mentioned, how many of you have a list of your medications, or is it just in the little bottles in the little cabinet or wherever you keep it? But you know what? When we're in the middle of an emergency, you may not be able to access it and you may not think about it. So it's good to have these things prepared ahead of time.
I'm going to use Carla's example. So think about your 3 people that might be in your emergency contact. How many of you actually know all 3 of those people's phone numbers? I see a few, and I'm just thinking it's a really good point that you need to have them written down and save somewhere else besides just your phone in case a flood and your phone gets flooded. I'm thinking, I can think my 3 contacts, and I know 2 of their phone numbers. But my 3rd person is my mom, and I call her a couple times a week, and I still have no idea what her phone number is. So I talk to her probably like an hour a week. I don't know what her phone number is, so I just push the button. So besides your emergency contacts, your neighbor contacts are really good too. So we want to think about having 3 neighbors, or at least a few neighbors that you know that are usually home. So this is the time to make friends with. Oh, it could be the stay-at-home mom, it could be the person that works from home, the busybody that knows everything. They are going to be really important because if you're away at work, if you're away from home, and suppose something like a big flood happens or an earthquake, they're going to be the ones that are actually going to be in your neighborhood and knowing what's actually happening. I don't know how many of you are here for the Cook Inlet earthquake. Back what, 2019? Yeah, I see some people, and I know some people were worried about the roads. Well, the information took a little bit of time to get out, but if you're able to contact your neighbor and they say, oh, the road looks fine, I see cars driving back home, you feel a lot safer, versus, oh no, don't come home now. We see that the power line is down, there's no electricity in our house. So knowing a few of your neighbors is really good for that. So 3 people have their emergency contact information, or not their contact information, their phone numbers, being able to text them to ask how the road conditions are, or, and in that same instance, perhaps you might have an animal, a dog or a cat, and hey, they just told you that all the electricity is down, so you don't want to go home yourself, but they might be able to let your dog or your cat out. And they might have, emergency key, those kind of things. Obviously, pay attention to who that is. You don't want to be giving the key to your house out to everybody. But if it's somebody you trust or you have a family member that lives close by, they're really good to know, especially the people that are home more often. So seniors, the busybodies, definitely connect with a few of those.
And let me clarify, because I work for the Aging and Disability Resource Center, all seniors are not busybodies. Just saying. Okay. Another thing is, when you were kids or you were younger and your parents had the list of, because usually the utility companies send out a list that have all the important phone numbers. Well, they don't really do that anymore, right? So it's your job to know the most important phone numbers you will need during a disaster. Police, emergent and non-emergent, fire, gas, electric, poison control, family, friends. We can't tell you enough how important it is to have these listed already, and in the toolkit, it's there. All you can do is fill out the numbers.
We've talked a little bit before about how important medication is. It's not just for people with disabilities, but many people have some kind of medication that they're taking. So as Carla mentioned earlier, Some people, might not have that written down anywhere, so making sure that we either fill out the emergency medication or the medication list that lists how much, what medications you're taking, your pharmacy, your doctor, etc. Or next time you go to get your refill, ask the pharmacy if you can get a printout. I know some people's handwriting is a little bit better, but sometimes like 200 milligrams might look really like 500 milligrams. So if you could just get a printout of that, put it in your emergency papers, then you wouldn't have to fill out the paper. Also taking a picture of it and keeping it on your phone, so you have a couple different ways to keep your medication list. Something I could mention at the beginning, but I usually do, so I'm going to mention it here. So we're talking about making plans, getting tickets, etc. We really want to make sure that as many people as possible are prepared at home. That includes practicing a plan as well. But they've seen in big disasters as much as 50% of staff don't show up to work the next day. So, if you own an art supply store, that's probably not that big of a deal. But if you're an assisted living home or you have staff and you're an agency that's helping the seniors and people with disabilities that are really relying on that staff to get their participants out of bed, to get a medication, those kind of things, we really want to make sure as many staff as possible can get to work the next day. And obviously somebody might get hurt during the disaster or their family member might be, but if they've already made sure that they have a plan, they have their supplies and everything ready at home, they're more likely to show up and work the next day. So we don't want, all of our staff to be like, oh, there's a huge, tsunami coming or something like that. And instead of going to work, I'm going to be standing in line at Walmart with 500 other people and not go to work and not be able to get there. So that's why we're talking about this so much. Is it's not just people's families and their own family, but we really want to make sure people that are working in an agency are able to get to work, that their staff is prepared too. But for homes or assisted living facilities, we want to make sure people are practicing their plans. And it really depends on, your family or your individual situation. Some people might want to do it once a month, but you might only want to do it quarterly. But we would recommend at least quarterly to practice your plans, whether it's a fire evacuation. You might have, okay, we're just at home with my family, doing a fire evacuation plan. I feel like a lot of people are probably doing that in the summer when it's nice and warm and sunny out. Hey, we're all going to get outside and take our little kids and practice getting outside. Okay, well and all, you might have that down and do that a few times in the summer, but what happens when it's cold and it's dark out? So we want to practice these realistic scenarios because a lot of times a fire can happen when it's cold and dark out. Hey, we don't need to actually get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, but come December, 6 o'clock at night, it's cold and dark out. So that would be a great time to practice your plan. When it's dark out, you might find out slightly different things. Hey, maybe the place that we always met at just the end of our driveway when it was light out was a great place. But when we go out in the winter, that is really, really, really dark. But our next door neighbor has a street light right there. So maybe we're going to change our location, and we learned that when we tried it during a realistic scenario in the actual dark. So then you could change your location, and you would only know that because you've already tried it, and you don't want to be during an actual fire. And some people went to the spotlight and they're like, oh, I can see over here. But some people went to the original meeting plan and you can't even see them because it's dark. So make sure we do those realistic scenarios. Do it in the winter, even when it's cold and dark, because it could actually teach you some things. And make sure we check our smoke detectors when you practice. So at least do that twice a year.
Smoke detectors, extremely important. Make sure when time changes, if they continue to do that, make sure that that's the time that you check your smoke detectors, just to make sure it's working. All right, so our next section is section 3, tips for specific disabilities. So fire exit, we're going to discuss communication, tips for the specific disabilities, communication disabilities, intellectual and cognitive disabilities, deaf or hard of hearing, vision disabilities, mobility disabilities, mental health conditions, and medical conditions. We're going to discuss a little bit about what you need to do with any disability that you might have. And you may have that diagnosed disability, or it may be undiagnosed, but you know yourself and you know the folks that you work with and you know your family members. So keep that in mind when you're making a plan about how you're going to exit out of a facility or your own home, or if you're at the doctor's office. How many of you all have been to the movie theater? I know everybody can stream movies now, but when you go to a movie theater, what are the things they discuss right off the bat? Here are your exits in case of an emergency. Well, we're not all on a plane and there's 4 exits. So we need to be aware of where, if we need to exit a place, where it is, where it's located, and how can we exit safely. Medical conditions. Medications, keep enough for 7 days. And we know that we used to tell people, and we still tell people, talk to your doctor, try to go in and get your new prescription filled a little bit early so you have an extra few pills and you'll be able to save those, or you'll have a little extra to be able to put in that 7 day. However, nowadays, doctors, as long as they're not controlled medications, will work with you, especially if you get the 3-month mail order meds and those kind of things. But you need to have at least try, in Lower 48, they say 3 days. We're in Alaska. Everybody wants to say we're in Alaska. Everything's different. Well, you need 7 days because it's going to take a little bit of time for extra medications to get up here. And in all honesty, let's think about it. You won't be the only one that's needing that extra medication. So there's going to be a number of people. Make sure, as Lanny said earlier, get your medication list from your pharmacist, or if you're going to your doctor, ask for your current medication list. The last thing we need to have someone doing is taking 2 blood thinners because their doctor changed it, but they still have the bottles or they still have it written down and are not aware, because sometimes we don't always know what all our medications are for. You should always ask, but you know how that goes. So we want to make sure you have the most current list. If you have medications that have to be refrigerated, how would you do that? The thought for the day. How would you refrigerate your medication if your electricity goes out? So it's something to think about, make a plan.
And I'm going to give a little hint for how to keep your medications refrigerated. And if you're kind of early in the morning and you're drinking coffee and it hasn't quite made it yet, you can always get, you know, especially if you have to leave your house and you're going to a shelter or a friend's house, etc. I want to make sure that medication stays refrigerated when you're there. You can get those freezer packs, keep them in the freezer, so those are ready to go with you, and a little portable cooler. So you can pop those in, and then your medication will stay cool for at least a couple hours, depending on how good that cooler pack is. So that's a real easy way to do it until you get somewhere with electricity and a refrigerator. Carla also said snow for the winter. Yeah, that's very fun. Oh, here we go. This is my story. So, big question is, should I stay or should I go? So during an emergency, a disaster, how do you know if you should stay or go? Does anybody want to tell me? Let's say there is an earthquake. How would you know if you should stay where you are, shelter in place, or go? Anybody want to shout it out? Right here. Okay, I'm going to repeat that because I got most of that, I think. I think the first thing was like, if you have the supplies in your own home to stay, you can stay. That is a good point. That's one thing to think about. Anybody else have any other ideas? How should you decide if you should stay or go somewhere during a disaster? Okay, it's like break. Here we go, Joe.
Well, you're talking to an expert. I did the 64 earthquake in 1922.
Wow.
And we had no water. And National Guard came in with these big things, and went on underneath there. They arrived with the water. We were the only one that had gas stove and cooking. So everybody in our neighborhood came to our house and we did the cooking. And when you got a 9.2 earthquake, the roads are unable to. The airport was closed. The only way to get stuff in is stay there. Elmhurst Air Force Base. So we did not have any roads for almost 3 months. So there's no way to get around. My grandfather was in the 64 earthquake rescuing people from Club Paris downtown. Half the pennies fell down the Captain Cook. And I was 4 years old. And what I remember is my mom was holding on the flower things. My dad was holding on his favorite fan. My brother Kurt was on the couch watching the tree going this way and that way. And the house was moving. So I can tell you, I lived through other disasters. I lived through earthquakes. Those are small. I'm an expert for a 9.2 earthquake. What do you do when you don't have these people have use of it's going to happen. It's been 35 years until we have a natural big earthquake. What do we do if that happens and you don't have no roads?
Thank you, Joe. Joe made a lot of good points there. So first of all, he mentioned buildings falling down. So yeah, if you're in a building, there's clear and present danger. It is falling partly down. It's on fire. There's a gas leak or something. You need to go. You need to leave. He also mentioned the National Guard coming in. So the next part is, if you don't know, you need to listen. Like you're like, okay, well, it seems like the area I'm in is safe. You need to be listening and listening to first responders, the National Guard, the police, etc. If they tell you you need to evacuate, you need to evacuate. So definitely listen to the first responders, the police, National Guard, etc. So while you think, oh, my house seems fine, they may know information you don't know. There might be a fire that has broken out and it is moving rapidly. So if they are telling you in your area you need to evacuate, please listen to them to keep yourself as well as those first responders safe. Here is my story about if I should stay or go. So Swan Lake Fire, I think it was 2019-ish down in Kenai Soldotna area. So this was like a Saturday, I think, and camping right by Cooper Landing, one of my favorite spots on the river, right? This is what it looked like when we got there, set up camp. Absolutely gorgeous, right? And my very favorite campsite on the river, right? Set up camp, get our spot, and start floating down the river in a little raft. We're about an hour or two into our float, and this is what it starts looking like. And this is not filtered or anything at all. All of a sudden, it just starts getting darker. The clouds, or it's not even clouds, it's just ash. It is just ash, and we're like, this is not like very good. Literally, sometimes ash is falling on us, and I'm like, it looks like we're in like problems right now. What is going on? We usually stop and fish a ton, but by this time, we're like, yeah, let's just kind of get off the river. This is not feeling very safe. So we get off the river. We're like literally the only people there, and it's a Saturday, and we're like, it's not very good. And we stop at right across the street from where we're camping, and on one side, it looks like the first picture, still clear. Looking the other way, it looks like this. And we were at what's now I think 2 brothers, and literally sometimes these big chunks of ash that are like this big are falling down on us. And we see, and we're like, and I'm like, I think we should go. My husband's like, oh, it's not happening. And so there's a couple of first responders, like fire people, sitting at the table next to us. And like, hey, are we like evacuating? Like, what's going on? And they're like, hey, well, don't worry about it. If we do evacuate, we will come and shake your tent and tell you need to go in the middle of the night. I'm like, yeah, okay, no. I'm like, I really like my camp spot. It is absolutely gorgeous, but I wear contacts, and there's no way I'm getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and driving home. We're only 2 hours away, right? So I ordered like a Dr. Pepper or cherry coke to get caffeine, and I say, husband, here's the deal. If we drive home now, I'll drive us home. If we're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and evacuating, you're driving us home. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. And so he's like, okay, we go. And the next morning, they shut everything down. All the campsites were shut down. They shut down the river. And I'm not smart enough to be able to figure out how to embed the video, but it was that night that if anybody saw the videos of the road where people are driving through like fire and there's fire on the trees and everything. And then they started shutting down the road the next day too, where they had to have pilot cars take people through. And so that's my story about should you stay or should you go. If you feel like you should go, in my opinion, you should go. Even if the first responders haven't told you you need to evacuate yet, it feels like your intuition tells you to go do it.
Your intuition is correct. Okay, there are 4 types of emergency kits. There's the safety kit, and it's called a skip kit, and that's the one where you have to stay in place. And Betty's going to discuss what should be in these kits. The go kit is a backpack or a bag that has a few items in it like water, non-perishable foods, and an extra pair of socks, and those names of those phone numbers and contacts and emergency papers in a Ziploc bag so it doesn't get wet. A list of your medications, your extra medication. You grab that go kit and you go. When Katrina happened many moons ago, college students at the university, you know, you're in college, you don't have all this stuff, right? They have backpacks full of books. So they got creative and they used their pillowcases. And they threw things in their pillowcase that they felt was important. I'm sure probably not what we necessarily would have thought was most important, but they did. And they threw those things on their back and they hiked through all that flood and debris and everything else. So it doesn't matter what you use, just have something with the items in there. You have small children, make sure that you want to have some things for those kids that make them feel safe, such as the stuffed animal, those kinds of things that you conscientiously should think about because they're scared too. And the people they look up to that are really nervous running around trying to get this stuff together, it's a whole lot easier when you grab that go kit, grab your child's go kit and go. A home kit, and also don't forget your pet and his or her service animal kit. What's in a skip kit? Oh, this is my slide, sorry. Okay, so you need a whistle. Okay, I know we don't all carry whistles around with us, but it's a good idea to have it on your keychain. I know we don't all carry your keys around with us all the time, but it is good to have it accessible. A whistle is a great form of a way for, like, God forbid, you're under a little bit of debris. You have your whistle with you because you had it in your pocket, you had it on your keys, whatever the case may be. You're able to put the whistle in your mouth. If a fireman's coming by or a policeman coming by or the neighbors are coming by and they're saying, is anybody in here? You may not be able to say, here I am, come get me. But you can have that whistle and you can be blowing on it. And it's amazing what those emergency animals, they're not emergency animals, what are they? Responders animals can do and can hear. And they can acknowledge and they can let their handlers, know the vicinity that you're in. Because you have a whistle in your mouth and you just breathe, kind of like what we were doing yesterday with our exercises, and you breathe out. The whistle's going to make some noise. You also need a flashlight with extra batteries. Do not put the batteries in the flashlight. Have them in a bag, have them taped, have them strapped to the flashlight so you're not looking for them in the dark. But if you put them in the flashlight, they're going to flow. So you want to make sure that it's a portable flashlight. A lot of people, not going to lie, I'm going to age myself a little bit. a few years ago, electricity goes out of our house, and I'm like going in my closet, because I have an emergency closet, and I'm getting all my flashlight. My kids come upstairs with their cell phone flashlights, you know, no big deal. Didn't even think about it, so I'm just saying. A bandana is a toolkit. A bandana can be used for many things. What can a bandana be used for? For your face. For your face. What are some other things? You got it. For your face to keep the ash out. What other things could it be used for? Yes, ma'am. You can signal someone if you're in your car, I need help. People can use bandanas for 1,000 things. Some people will use them to, you know, put water through or put snow on, let the snow melt, and they can use it for, honestly, a bandage. Some people have used them for diapers for little kids. You never know. It's amazing how people can be creative when they have what they need. A permanent marker. Permanent marker is something that we don't all think about. The reason we need a permanent marker is, God forbid, you might need to write your name on yourself or on your loved one or even on your pet, on their belly, so that if you get separated or whatever the case may be, they have identification. That was something that was not done in a previous disaster, and it was very difficult for Red Cross and folks to identify people, animals, not just because of possibly passing away, but also getting people together in the same shelters, because when it's a massive disaster, there's a number of shelters that are opened up. And a permanent marker can also, you can write a note, we've left this house, you know, we're not here, everybody's out, whatever the case may be. A Mylar blanket. The Mylar blanket is that silver blanket, and it can keep you warm. You can also use it if you have to, if you know, Alaska, very creative, and a lot of people camp. So you may not be able to stay in your house if you don't have electricity, you don't have water, but you may have a camper, you may be able to stay in your camper, or you may have tent and the equipment, such as landing. And you can put that Mylar blanket down on the ground, so you're not directly on the ground. Hand warmers. Everybody in Alaska knows what hand warmers are, and my coworker Lindsay knows what feet warmers are, foot warmers are. So you make sure that you have those just in case. I know you all are tough and rugged, but you know there's some times that you need this stuff just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your loved ones, and or your clients. Emergency information, can't stress it enough.
And then Carla already talked about GoPay a little bit. So that's something that you would take with you and go to a shelter, go to somebody else's house. Radio with batteries, flashlight, medication, water, and food for 2 or 3 days. First aid kit, extra clothes, also comfortable shoes that you can walk and move around in. And we talked about emergency papers. So now we go.
So we talked about a lot of things to be in an emergency kit. What are some suggestions of things to put in your home emergency kit? Yes. Oh, do we have a
My home, my brother had, is if the stoves don't work, we have our camp stoves we use. Because we don't have any gas in them, and it's good to have one of those. And make sure you have a lot of water, and make sure you have those napkins. Because you have no power, put that in your house, because I got one of those in my brother's house. We got our house, because our neighborhood knows where to go when there's disaster.
That's great. And does anybody know that water has an expiration date? Yes, so you want to make sure you check your emergency kit every year so that everything still stays up to date. Yes.
Okay, and I to have on the street plus the one for, you know, the other certificate, but, my dad, comes from the old wedding things, and if you are like out nowhere, he used to carry a big matches with him to light and put a fire, light on wood or paper, and do that outside or inside if you need, these matches, something easy to take care of when you don't have electricity or anything, you always scratch it together to make fire.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, they're very helpful. What else would you put in your advocate?
It was something you presented in the earthquake, that you get the 5-gallon buckets and all the toilet seats put on top of it, because you're not gonna have water to possibly flush your toilets, you don't want to use your water, so an alternative to the bathrooms probably have the
Black trash bags, the really nice heavy duty ones, they come in handy very.
yes, they do. What else would you put in your emergency kit? Yeah, a tent. That's helpful.
For the batteries, like maybe like a phone, like the ones that charge your phone, but with solar power.
Yeah, absolutely. Different ways to charge your phone is always helpful. A lot of us have a lot of emergency information or utility information on our phones, so keeping those working is great. What else? We'll go through a few more things. So on the screen, we have a number of things, and N95 mask is always helpful, especially if there's a volcano. Canned food or non-perishable food. Also make sure you have a can opener so that you can get to the food. Emergency radio. There's a number of different kinds of emergency radios. You can get ones with batteries, ones with ring power. So that's a way to get emergency communications. Yeah, and then we can go to the next slide. Okay, so food and water for at least 3 days, 2 weeks is even better. A lot of times what I do is I get an extra can of beans or something when I go to the grocery store, and I just make sure that I have a stock of stuff that I can eat, maybe without cooking if I don't have electricity. Make sure that you have all the things that you need to take care of yourself. So a first aid kit, medication, copy of prescriptions and dosage, also having the doctor's information that prescribed it if you need to get a replacement or someone needs to reach out, that's always helpful. Battery backups, not just for your phone, but also if you have a CPAP, if you have an electric wheelchair, if you use oxygen, all of those types of battery backups. Communications, we talked about a NOAA weather radio, a flashlight, hygiene and sanitation. So towelettes, hand sanitizer. The last thing you want is to get sick during a disaster. So think about what you would do to like keep yourself safe from sickness. Protective gear. So volcanic ash is like little glass, and you don't want that to get on yourself to give you scratches. So masks, gloves, boot goggles, sunscreen, eating supplies, stuff like that. Extra cash and extra car keys or house keys. ATMs might not be functioning. If the internet's down, then the debit cards or credit cards don't work. So if you need supplies, how will you get them? And then comfort items. We talk about comfort items for children, but also for yourself. During disasters, it's a lot of waiting and then doing a lot of things. So what are you going to do during those waiting times? Do you like journaling, coloring, drawing, reading, knitting, anything like that? Having some extra supplies in your emergencies that can be very comforting and helpful. emergency papers. Everybody knows it's very annoying to replace a birth certificate, a social security card, a driver's license. So having copies of that can be very helpful, or having the original copy in an emergency kit or duplicate copy in your emergency kit. Particularly during disasters, sometimes you need to verify your identification to receive assistance from FEMA or the Red Cross. So making sure that you have that identification available is helpful, but also for your insurance company, making sure that your insurance policy is up to date and has the correct information, but also you know how to reach them and submit a claim if necessary. Have them in something waterproof. What I did, fireproof safe, but not a waterproof safe, so then I put everything in a Ziploc bag. Ziploc bags are great, they work great. And then also on a flash drive, I have my things saved to the cloud, so then I can log into my computer with my iCloud account and get those even if I don't have my phone with me. So that's available, but also you could, if you had a trusted friend or a family member that you can store emergency items at their house or documents, they can have a copy of them, then you know that they have a copy and go to them in case your house is impacted.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's just bothered me that we're doing this here. Right now, we have people on the custom plan that are getting evacuated by the National Guard and all that. Looking through what you have said, none of these, I know for a fact, a lot of these companies could not have ordered a lot of this stuff because the economy out there is not good, as everybody knows. But have you guys thought of setting things up or going out to the villages now that this has come full center? This wasn't even expected until what, 3 or 4 days ago, and then all of a sudden people are going down the river with the water, you know, and kids or houses are being turned over, they're finding their houses are gone. Has anybody from the Red Cross or anywhere have thought about putting on this stuff there, or is it just here? So this information you're doing is essential for everybody, but when you can't afford things, it's going to be, you know, I would be nervous that I couldn't afford, you know, support any of this stuff. So a different set of circumstances here, we have roads to go to the store, they don't, you know, and so I just want to see if you guys have thought about working with the corporations to get this in every household, whether, you know, you're in fire or in flood, because floods come there every spring. But this is the worst that anybody's ever seen, where houses are coming off the highways. That says something. That now we go start looking at them as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the question. Red Cross is across the entire state of Alaska. We have volunteers currently out in Bethel working at the shelter, but in regards to our preparedness programs, one of my wonderful colleagues goes out to the villages and does similar presentations. He does tailor them to their needs, to their circumstances. He grew up in Point Hope and all along the western coast, so he is very familiar with what the situation is, or the situations that are happening out there. We definitely work with the corporations. We work with a number of organizations out in the rural communities to get them this information, but also to get them smoke alarms to it. So we install 3 smoke alarms across the state of once disaster hits. So we are working really hard. We're working with the state, we're working with a number of agencies to help with the evacuation and sheltering.
And some of these things, I'm just thinking like Go Kit. You know, Carly talked about using a pillowcase. You don't have to buy a backpack specifically for it. Extra clothes could be things like an old set of clothes that you were going to donate or a size up for your young kids so that you don't have to buy something extra. Food and can openers, yeah, you do need to actually buy some things for that. So different ways to make things cheaper though, or not cost as much. There's a lot of tips and tricks for that.
Yeah, there's an idea in preparedness about good, better, best. We always try to strive for the best, but there's also good and better options. So getting an extra can of food as opposed to buying a whole new pantry, like that's a good option. And so there are ways to make it low cost or no cost. So you just need to be creative, which we are good at in Alaska. We're good at that. So yeah, if there's any ideas about how to make it low cost or no cost, we share it with everybody so that we can all be prepared.
And just a note on that, we work with a lot of seniors, and seniors a lot of times are on a fixed income. So that's why it's so important to know your neighbors, whether you live in an apartment complex or you live in a neighborhood or whatever the case may be. Joe's example of his family being the only one that had gas, and so everybody from the neighborhood came to their house to cook. Well, there's some examples of where people will say, if you'll get the water, if you'll store the water, then I'll get the non-perishables. If you do this, I'll do that. And so by the community coming together and communicating with each other, it helps those costs go down because it's not cheap, especially at the initial setup. But it's something that is so important. So you put what you can together and then communicate with your neighbors or your loved ones. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I need a little help. Because I guarantee you there's others that do too. When you're storing all of the supplies, choose a safe place. Make sure that it's cool and dark so nothing's going to go bad. A closet or garage, under the bed or stairs. And lay your supplies in a large container like a garbage can or something on wheels. You most likely are not going to be able to carry this. You're going to have more than what would be in a backpack. You need something that has wheels. Don't really care what it is. Just think about what you already have. If you're on a limited budget, you might have a little garden wagon that you've had forever. The kids may have had a little red wagon. You can do whatever you need. Now, don't store your stuff in a place where you have to go down 2 flights of steps, get underneath your stairs, pull out all the Christmas decorations, and then get to your stuff because you're not going to have that time. So be conscientious of where you store your stuff, making sure that it's accessible.
Next up, we're going to talk about customizing your kit. So adding your kit based on health or medical needs. So finding a doctor for your health and medical needs. Discussing potential changes to your needs due to disasters, backup supplies, at least 1 month of medicine, assistive devices, and medical supplies. Other things to consider is battery backup, power for electronic mobile devices, oxygen, and their assistive technology needs, personal hygiene items, if you have assistive, assistance animals, food and supplies. But anyone here think of any they would need specifically for their disability they would want to put in their kit? Go ahead.
I wear contacts, so without them, I really can't see. I couldn't drive or anything, so I make sure I have a pair of backup glasses. I haven't worn glasses in 10 years, but I just have my old prescription, especially during like the volcano. If ash comes and I have to take my contacts out.
Good point there, actually. And then also on top of that, what's called the gift that you have to, yeah, that's too. Got that extra that. But anyone else here? Do anything else? Back there? You like my phone?
Assisted living home, and I've got about 26 plants. And when I started the facility, I'm dual licensed. And the fire marshal asked me, he says, in the event of a fire, what are you going to do? I told him, I said, well, what I decided that I was going to do is I went and got sleds, the sleds that you get like hold behind the sewing machine, and I put them underneath everybody's bed. So like in the event of a fire night, at least you can roll them into the sled and go. And, you know, an extra blanket and you're golden. But we also, because I'm dual licensed, I've noticed that my handicapped people that are mentally challenged, when we go out for our fire drill, we do our fire drills every month because anything can happen. And so we noticed it was probably about 3 months ago that we really noticed what was happening. But when we take everybody out and we get to our place, then staff runs back in to get somebody else because there's so many clients. But we noticed that the mentally challenged were actually, my people with wheelchairs, they would surround my wanderers. So my wanderers were stuck between all these wheelchairs, so it's like the clients were looking after the clients.
Thank you. Love to know that. That's interesting. Actually, funny enough, I brought the sleds to Bridget team when I first started Red Cross volunteer. And I also brought it up using oil, I think it was, to make it so that they can bring the homes out faster by putting oil in the floor. In case of like a fire. Of course, not flammable oil, obviously, but yeah.
Cool. So now that we've talked about supplies, it's important to know where to put your supplies. Oh, sorry, yes.
Make sure like the walkers, wheelchairs, and extra batteries have the first aid on it so that they can get to the right person. Yes, and all that stuff because things are chaotic.
Yes, that's a great point. Labeling things is very important. Emergency shelters are very chaotic. There's a lot of people coming in with a variety of different experiences and needs, and making sure things are labeled so they can stay and be with the correct person is very important. Supplies for everywhere. Okay, so we talked about what to put in your emergency kit, but it's important to know where to put it. So I know for my work, I will get a call and we need to go out to a scene or stay late or stuff like that. So I have extra food and clothes and stuff at work. And I always carry my medication for the day with me, just in case something comes up that I have to, I won't be able to go home as quickly as I thought. But then also having supplies for your vehicle, it makes it so you don't have to grab things, it's already all set and you can get in your car and go. But also, if you get stuck in the snow or stuck in bad weather or there's an accident and you can't pass and you run out of gas or something like that, how will you stay safe? And making sure you have an emergency kit for your vehicle is very And then, yes, things that you keep on your person at all times. So I always keep a water bottle. I always keep my medication with me. I always keep a hand warmer / phone charger thing, just in case. You never know what's going to happen. So I always definitely say preparedness is a lifestyle. So that always be prepared just in case.
Okay, I'll be quick because we're running out of time. Lots of good questions, but pet service animal kit, Red Cross will open a shelter for service animals if possible, right next to the regular shelter. But I think about my animal. This is my dog, Fluffy Blaze. She would be much happier at a friend's house. So I have Kate ready to go. Already has her food, water, blanket, gentle leader. She's a husky, so she pulls a lot. Leash, etc., rabies certificate. So if need be, a friend could pick her up and be ready to go and take her with, or I could drop them off instead of bringing them to the shelter if I have to go to the shelter.
Evacuation, shelters in Alaska, what you need to think about it, where are they and what do I need to bring? Contingency planning, that means that you've got a plan. This is what we're going to do for those who own assisted living homes, who are the staff that are going to be able to stay or get there, or how are you going to transport people and combine everybody into one assisted living facility for families moving in together temporarily. Does your agency, for those who do have businesses and or assisted living facilities, group homes, do you have a continuity of operation plan, which is called a COOP? That means you've got a plan set up. This is what we're going to do in an emergency. This is who's going to take care of everything. This is where everything is accessible. These are all the documentation, the paperwork, the locations, the phone numbers, anything for you to be able to continue running your business as best as possible in an emergency situation.
So the Red Cross has a whole program called Disaster Disability Integration, and it solely focuses on making sure our programs and all our programs, our volunteering opportunities are accessible to all individuals. So we have our program mission and values. So vision, disaster cycle services, community prepared and committed to equitable, meet and diverse needs with clients throughout the disaster cycle. So what this kind of means for you as an individual showing up to a shelter. So the shelter will most likely be an ADA accessible building. The shelter will be staffed 24/7, but the staff there are not trained to do help individuals with activities in daily living. So if you have a caregiver that would be coming and helping you with activities of daily living, they are more than welcome to come into the shelter and provide those services. We do have healthcare professionals that can help with medication replacement and durable medical equipment replacement. But Red Cross doesn't have a secret stash of things. So we're going to be looking to replace some stuff, but a lot of other individuals are also going to be looking to replace stuff. So that's why the preparedness is important, and to grab your equipment that you need to live with you as you come to the shelter. The shelter is on cots. So it is an emergency shelter. It's not anything fancy, but it will be a safe place for you to stay in case there is an emergency. There will be a food provided, and it will accommodate any dietary restrictions. If there is a very large emergency, it might take a little bit for the supply chain to get back up and running, so it might take a little bit to get specific foods. So if there's specific foods that you need to eat, or you can't eat general foods, then make sure that's in your emergency kit. If there are sensory needs around food that they can only eat one specific thing, it might take a little bit for everything to get up and running for us to receive that. Are there any questions about that? Yes, sir. Oh, okay, we only have 3 minutes. I'll be around after for any questions.
And then we're going to, after really down to recover, which means return home safely, work with trusted sources, managing property damage. Return home safely, home safely means from raise and return home. The authorities says it's safe to do so. Report broken gas, sewer, and water lines, loose or gangway power wires to the local municipality. Work with trusted sources, which means seek out the sources and supplies from trusted sources such as the Red Cross and FEMA also. Beware of scams and take caution when sharing personal information. Manage property damage, which means if there's evidence of structural damage to your home, get a review by a trained inspector before you go back in. And then go to the next slide. After recover, being when in doubt, throw it out. Be aware of the risk of electrification. Only use a generator outdoors and away from windows. Which means if there's been an extended power outage throughout, food that may have been 3 degrees for 2 hours or more. And then be aware of the electrocution. If there's water in the home, don't go and your power is off at the main switcher. If you don't know, contact leaders. Only use a generator outdoors and away from windows. You want to avoid the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. Make sure your CO detectors have batteries. And then after knowing how to recover, document any property damage, wearing protective clothing and leaving lean on your support networks, which means documenting property damage and protecting insurance. To file a claim, if you're clearing debris or cleaning, follow proper procedures and wear protective clothing and always work with someone for safety. And then lastly, lean on your support network to help you recover. It could be your siblings or dad, it should be just one of your coworkers, pretty much. Go right across even. Yeah.
We're just going to wrap it up here. Sorry, we ended up having a lot of really good discussion, but there's a section on what to be prepared for. There's a section on resources. It talks about shows a lot of things we already talked about. Family emergency plans, templates, social media, Red Cross app. We talked already about agencies, and then we wanted to leave it just on this slide. This is really why we're doing this presentation, trying to make sure that people's loved ones' needs are being met during an emergency. So we'll leave that up here and let people ask questions, but I think we are now over time, so you guys can also go on break, but we'll just stay up here. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you very much for that beautifully informative presentation. I hope everybody is thinking about emergency preparedness. We definitely have reasons to think about that here in our state. So the Red Cross will be available for questions on the side while we're doing our networking and vendor break until 10:15, and then we have an action panel on aging and disabilities. So we have a break until about 10:14. Thank you.
But I managed to lock it up yesterday.
every year we've gathered together at this summit and had what we've called either a legislative panel, but we've expanded that over the years to call it an action panel, because we have members of the panel that are beyond specific legislative work, that are all advocates and working on behalf of people that we support. So I'm delighted to welcome you who are part of the program today. I'm Michelle Giroux. I am a part of the planning committee for this summit. I'm also the executive director of Health Community Resources, and I'm the board president for the Key Coalition of Alaska, which is an advocacy group that works on behalf of Alaskans with disabilities across the state. Today, we'd love to welcome to our panel Chelsea Burke, who is the operations manager for the Alaska Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education. And I'm going to let them introduce a little bit more about their organizations and specifically what they do. So I won't go into deep introductions at this point, just to give you an overview of who's here at the table. Next to Chelsea is Dr. Mary Wilson, who is the CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. And the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority serves beneficiaries across the state of Alaska in several different areas, including those with disabilities and elders. And then next to her is Representative Andy Josephson, who's been quite a champion for many of our issues. He currently serves as the chair of the Finance Committee of the House and was quite an advocate this year, advocating for money that didn't result in some things that we wanted to see happen, but his voice was very powerful, and we hope this next session will get some more things to the finish line. So I'm going to turn it over to them to do a little bit more introduction, and then we'll get into the questions. So Chelsea, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Chelsea Burke. I'm the operations manager for the Alaska Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education. Our council is a governor-appointed but federally mandated body, advocates, provides oversight, supports inclusive services across education, employment, health, transportation, community life for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I will say thank you all for being supportive. I have my emotional support notes here. It's not that I don't know the material, it's just very important. I want to make sure to get it right. So if you see me looking down, it just provides me support and calms my nerves. Our council's North Star is living with choice in your community and with dignity. And that takes housing, rides, care, protections that actually work within Alaska's geography. And each year, our crowning achievement is our legislative visit in Juneau. And we try our best to bring practical wins to Juneau.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Wilson. I'm the CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust. Hopefully some of you are familiar with that. I'm also, should say, I'm fairly new. I started last January, so I've also got notes. The staff has prepared some, helped me prepare some answers to possible questions, but I'll do my best to speak and then look at my notes when I need to. My background is I'm a pediatrician, actually by training, and worked in physician and executive stuff for a long time. Grew up in Anchorage and came back up here, and I'm a failed retiree, I would say. So hence seeing me up here. The Alaska Mental Health Trust, just briefly, is a unique organization, and the state of Alaska is really, I believe, the only state that has anything like this. We were formed in 1994 with money given to the state and then some land, 1 million acres of land given to the trust to support in perpetuity, forever, our beneficiaries. And our beneficiaries are defined by statute, but it's folks with mental illness, substance abuse, intellectual developmental delay, Alzheimer's related dementias, traumatic brain injury, that sort of thing. And so we have a group of people we support year after year. We give grants, so we are a grant-making organization. We work with partners who are experts in the fields of our beneficiaries, and we help with the state. We give money to the state of Alaska as well, the Department of Health, to help promote programs. We see ourselves as instigators and catalysts for meaningful change to the mental health outcomes of our beneficiaries in Alaska. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Andy Josephson, lifelong Alaskan, born here in town, lived around the state, including in rural Alaska a couple of times. I was a teacher and an attorney by training. The last 13 years, I've been a legislator exclusively. And my coalition, there are 21 in a group of, well, the 40 house members. So we just have one over the 50-50 mark. And I was selected to be co-chairman of the House Finance Operating Budget. So, I mean, lots of people, all legislators do, who have, from your working community, your colleagues, who have requests about, you know, what the state can do to meet the needs that are there. And I view it as my role to listen. And 9 times out of 10, at least, the request is a reasonable one, and I fight for it. I figure that's my job. I also know that, frankly, the state often enough has the resources. And so we were pretty effective this past session at getting some things done, and we want to get more done, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, all of you. I think for those of you that are familiar with Mr. Rogers, anybody ever watch Mr. Rogers back in the day? You know, we'd always say, you know, look for the helpers. When things are hard and dark and you're scared, you look for the helpers. And the people sitting here represent helping organizations. The legislature is your helper. They work for you. And we're going to talk a little bit about the process, legislative process, as well as what the trust and the Governor's Council does in terms of impacting the legislative process. But just think about these people as connectors to things that you have questions about and things that you need help with. It's been a wild ride, probably the last 10 years, but the last 6 months feels like a roller coaster that won't stop. And we as advocates, all of us here, you represent different areas. There's care coordinators here, there's direct support professionals, there's provider agencies, other organizations. We're all here to lift up people with disabilities in Alaska. So we're going to ask our panel some questions about, from their lens, what are they working on in relation to some of the things that are challenging for the people. So I'm just going to go in order the questions that I asked, because that may be how you prepared your remarks. We'll just go down the row here. So housing is a big issue for a lot of people. Being able to afford to live, be able to feel safe. So just talk a little bit about what initiatives you might be working on to enhance affordable, accessible housing across Alaska.
I guess I'm first. I will say, our council works on a federal oversight committee that requires us to do planning. So our current plan has a housing objective and activity to create a PSA around housing rights and accessible documentation in housing. So having plain language leasing agreements or housing rights, and that could even be you're in a group home setting. What rights do you have as an individual? So that work is kicking off, and we're excited to have a PSA that can be used on social media, on YouTube by about this time next year. Additionally, our council and the statewide Independent Living Center successfully advocated, not this past January, but year before, to raise the environmental modification cap under Medicaid from $18,000 to $40,000, which was a significant win to help Alaskans age or stay in their homes safely. However, now, as you may know, Alaska faces a shortage of Medicaid-approved contractors who can complete that work, the work of those accessibility modifications. So I would actually challenge the audience at this point. Do you know a contractor? Do you know a remodeling business? Now's the time for each of us to be advocates, to teach them and encourage them, hey, can you become certified to do this work?
For seniors and people with disabilities, and I understand there are some burdens on the state side, to the environmental modification program, and I know that Senior Disability Services is committed to working alongside to make that work, so that people can get the most out of that $40,000 cap.
Thanks, Chelsea. So the trust definitely invests in housing in the communities all over Alaska. The housing needs to serve our beneficiaries, and so that's one of our qualifications. So it's not all housing, but it's a lot of housing. And some of the things we worked on, really some capital investments we made recently in the past year, permanent supportive housing in Nome, Bethel, Sitka, Juneau, Anchorage, and Ketchikan, which is under construction. Supportive affordable housing in Anchorage, the Kenai Peninsula, and Ketchikan. Long-term shelter transitional housing in Juneau and Anchorage, some of which I've toured. And then emergency shelters in McKinsky, Bethel, Anchorage, and many domestic violence shelters around the state. And we also invest in youth shelters. We are interested in youth and infant and childhood prevention of poor outcomes. And so one of the things we do is youth shelter programs in Juneau, Anchorage, and Fairbanks. We also have a lot of, we work with partners to do this. So we always work with partners at the trusts. We work with Basic Homeless Assistance Program, AHFC a lot, DOC and AHFC, Rural Housing Coordinators, the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, Gastineau Human Services, NeighborWorks, and many housing navigation programs. So we invest in this financially, we invest in it with our staff in terms of partnerships, and we try to look ahead with data about where the needs might be. So when someone has an idea, we try to analyze and say, is this a good fit for that community? Is this a good spot? Is this what that community needs? And let's make sure we drive the outcomes we expect to drive with the dollars that we spend on housing.
Andy, before you take over, I have a question for Mary. It's come up earlier because a lot of us, our hearts are with our fellow Alaskans in Western Alaska right now. So just curious, if people are impacted or they have friends, how would the trust come in or partner if there are people, beneficiaries that are impacted by the storms?
Yeah, thank you for that question. In fact, we were due to go to Kotzebue, being some of the team members, because we're doing a really innovative program in Neliac around crisis intervention in a rural community that we're piloting. And we wanted to go see the progress so far, but we of course canceled that trip. But many of our partners kept us informed about what was going on. We always have short-term grants available. They're $2,500 or less, and they can be applied directly, and then our partners help distribute them. So if people have short-term needs that are our beneficiaries, that they can qualify for, and that's always available.
Well, is this on? Some of this will be redundant, but I'll be brief. Environmental modifications that were noted. So I met, that was a meeting I had with the sort of the SDS community, and they made a very strong case that they had greater needs that were met by the FY24 budget. That's the previous fiscal year budget. I think they wanted $1 million rather than 575,000. But in the end, they got 575,000. One of the things was, it is typically environmental modification. So this is things like ramps for homes. Those are typically capital items. And so I sort of, was a supporter, but it was more in that bucket. And so it was looked out for more by my co-chairman. As to some of these other grants, the Homeless Assistance Program grant or CAP grant, another one is the Beneficiaries in Special Needs Housing or SNUG grant. These were recommended, I think, by the Mental Health Trust. And essentially, with the Mental Health Trust, because I trust them, no money. When they say jump, I say how high? And so if they say, because they're the experts, we need a match of general fund dollars, we're going to put in X, please give us the equivalent. I'm going to fight for that. And so in each instance, those things within our budget. The difficulty becomes around late April, early May, when you've got to make the balance, the budget balance. And there's another body, the Senate, that may want to cast something aside. And, you know, the administration, God bless them, at one point, because oil prices had fallen, so there was some reasoning for it, said that they didn't want any of the increases they'd asked for in the FY26 budget, with the exception of firefighting, fires, and disaster mitigation. The legislature plowed ahead anyway, and didn't really think they fully meant that. I'm not offending anybody, but and in the end, the governor, in fact, did not veto all the things either he or we requested. So it's this collective effort.
Thank you. You might just keep the microphone. We'll just start back and go back this way. Obviously, a lot of us have had a full focus on Medicaid the last few months. And Alaska may be a little bit unique in the way our Medicaid is structured, but the lack of Medicaid and Medicare providers is increasing. And it's increasing concern for seniors, in addition to the fear, constant fear of Medicaid cuts. What solutions have you been working on to assure access to and payment for healthcare? And we recognize that some of these are federal issues, but we know that state people advocate and talk to our federal delegation.
So there's no issue, and you can just take this to the bank. For my coalition of 21, there is no single issue that we are more focused on, having more meetings with the Department of Health, than the HR1, which is the president's bill, this sort of omnibus bill that touched on all these different things, 1,000 pages long, et cetera, and the threat to Medicaid programs. Essentially, to achieve the cuts the government, the Congress wants, they made things tougher to comply. So you all know this, I'm sure, but you have to reapply twice a year rather than once a year. And if you're on the Affordable Care Act, the window for enrollment, which is about to start, it hasn't started, is narrow. And so it's sort of designed for people to stub their toe and trip up and miss deadlines, and to reduce the number of people on government-assisted healthcare. So what we're doing is we're working with the Department of Health to do everything we can to keep, frankly, the rolls, the numbers, both whether it's whether it's SNAP or Medicaid, as high and robust as possible. And you've read all about this in the paper, but some of that entails making sure, for example, that the Department of Health has all the resources it needs. They did not get funded, so we built a virtual call center that was about $8 million. This is going to be sort of like what I said with Mental Health Trust. When the department says, Andy, I need you to jump, I'll say, how high? Well, we need this $8 million. Well, I'm going to break my back to make this happen. I'm going to do everything I can. And so that's, just know that when it comes to Medicaid programs, our majority is doing everything we can. Now, we are assisted by this Rural Health Transformation Fund. The applications are due essentially now, or darn close to now, and then the government, CMS, will make decisions at the end of the year, as I understand it, like the first of the year. And the difficult part is, what is a Rural Health Transformation Fund? It's sort of ambiguous. What it can't be is dollar supplanting. So what we can do with COVID dollars is sometimes say, oh, that's money that we can fill this gap with in our budget, freeing up dollars we would have spent for X, moving them over here to do something else. Could be funding education, totally unrelated. We can't do that as much with Rural Health Transformation. But this was the thing that, frankly, Murkowski worked so hard to achieve, and it could amount to as much as $1.4 billion over 5 years. So our best minds are looking at that to see how can this be used to help Medicaid programs.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so ever since really the budget was passed at the federal level, the trust has been working with all of our partners to try to understand where the gaps will be in Medicare and Medicaid. The but specifically Medicaid, as Andy was talking about. So what we do is try to analyze with our partners who have grant-making capability or capability of directing funds to the state about where are the likely gaps going to be, and then where's the most need. We try to analyze and figure out where that's going to be. So that's our approach, is trying to cover gaps that will exist because of any shortfalls in funding, but also looking at the big picture 2 or 3 years forward about what we expect to have happen. For example, in Alaska, we know the population is aging, and what does that mean for the state in the next few years? We do work with the Alaska Dementia Action Collaborative closely to expand the continuum of care for Alzheimer's. We work with the Brain Injury Council of Alaska to see what needs may come up for them. Remember, these are our beneficiary groups that we work with closely. And then we participate with community health services and clinics on a sliding scale for care that's given. We really try to focus on specialty care gaps that may exist and helping get those covered. And brain injury rehab, which you know is a tough one, is trying to sort that out for folks as they go forward. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we do have many grants, which are $2,500, that help do gap support for folks that need a month or something in their lives right then and there to get them through. And so I don't want to shortchange that. That's a very highly useful program that we offer. Thanks.
So our council has been coordinating to oppose any harmful reduction and maintain consistency for Medicaid and home and community-based waiver services for people with disabilities and any vulnerable Alaskans, which would include some of the senior population. And we've been involved, as Michelle has stated, just intense advocacy since the beginning of the year to encourage at the federal level just the importance of Medicaid for Alaskans. And let me just tell you, that is what our council does best. So we are set to be the eyes and ears for the intellectual developmental disability community in Alaska. And we strive to educate decision makers, policy makers, legislators on what Alaskans need to move forward. And I don't think, as Rep. Josephson was saying, there's not another single issue that we've been working harder on than maintaining Medicaid and home and community-based waiver services, and just translating what these changes in HR1 are going to look like for Alaskans, and primarily for the populations I work with, the most vulnerable, and what that might look like. I do want to highlight in this last session, there was one bill, so complex care residential homes, which is HB 73 SB 76, which is within our state, and it's a right size residential option for people with intensive needs that don't fit the existing home environments and services that we currently have. This was introduced by request of the governor, and our council did support that. And we're really hopeful for this to continue and this bill to become reality, because it will relieve some of the hospital burdens and facility backlogs for these individuals where they're really not receiving the appropriate needs where they are.
Thank you all. And as you're listening, you might want to write down some questions or follow up. We'll have some opportunity to ask some questions later. So another thing that hits the top of the leaderboard for seniors and people with disabilities is transportation. We're so lucky that there is still green grass out there today, and we're able to ambulate without walking on ice and snow. But we are in a winter state, and oftentimes, transportation is challenging. You can't get to the bus stop. When you get to the bus stop, it's not shoveled. And understanding, who's responsible for that road? Is it the state or is it the municipality? It's complicated. But all of these folks up here have worked on initiatives for transportation. So just wanted to give them an opportunity to share some of the potential solutions for advocacy that we've had related to transportation and mobility.
Thank you. We have been, or the council has been focusing efforts on advocating for House Bill 26, which is a transportation bill that would, the plan would create a statewide transportation plan, and that would clarify Department of Transportation's responsibilities, ensuring rural and remote communities aren't left behind, and strengthening coordination between public, tribal, and community transportation systems. And really hopeful for the potential of this plan, helping to make any future funding more efficient for our state. And of course, when we think about transportation, we think about buses, cars, how people are getting around, taxis, Ubers, but there's so many communities that that's not really applicable. And we have to think about what does that look like in rural Alaska? Is there a boardwalk? Do we use snow machines? And different ways to really support smaller communities where there are. And I will say another note is, whenever I go to Juneau, a lot of people are walking and using the sidewalks. And so just thinking about the snow removal and that being an accessibility factor, and we don't currently have any council priorities on that, but accessibility is certainly always at the front of our minds. So hopeful that this transportation plan that comes with HB 26 can also support those efforts as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and we at the trust also, we have a support of the bills that impact transportation. We do also give grants for vans, for example, for special needs. So that's another thing to think about. If you have an organization that is transporting groups that have special needs, we do offer grants for that, or drivers, that type of thing. No guarantees that will happen, but it's definitely happened in the past. The other thing we think about in rural Alaska is, are there ways of getting the same level of care without having to go anywhere? And so that's not transportation, but it's a good substitute for transportation. And so we are thinking about, is there, like I mentioned, the Manilia Clinic, are there ways that we can bring the services closer to home that are accessible to the folks in the community? That's a big opportunity for us in rural Alaska that we'd like to focus on. But again, we look at how do we leverage our partnerships, how do we support the legislation that they support, and then how do we fill gaps that folks need as they go forward in their lives every day.
So just a couple additions. I looked and saw that House Bill 26, which was just mentioned, sponsored by my colleague Jennifer Mina, who represents this part of town, got through the House. The vote was 22-17. That sounds sort of partisan. I don't remember what the debate was like, but passed. Senate now has it. That is the statewide transportation plan bill. There is also community, or rather coordinated community transportation grants. Those are run through the capital budget, I'm told. The Mental Health Trust wanted, again, I'm told, $1 million in the current budget. We funded $700,000. One thing that because they've existed so long, and so I'm sort of vigilant about keeping my eye on the human services and community matching grants. Those are often transportation related, of course, and so we are watchful of that. Another final issue is been top of mind in the media, and that's these essential air service programs. And I'm told just this morning that there is some patch. So these are to make travel in rural Alaska more affordable. And so that the planes will fly in and people can get where they need to go. There's apparently a patch of some sort that's going to happen. By patch, I mean, many of us are taking the federal government a year at a time or less, and just trying to muddle through. So it's not a sustainable fix, but I'm told there's something in the offing.
Thank you all. I think for those of you that are advocates for transportation, have a passion for transportation, to be alert to the fact that there is an Alaska Mobility Coalition that you can be part of. Anchorage is also going through, there's a transit center upgrade throughout the municipality of Anchorage. So again, if you are passionate about that, or you see some issues that need to be addressed, you can join in and be part of the solutions. Or help people that you're supporting to attend some meetings to give lived experience. I remember going to an assembly work session a couple of years ago, And it just was a moment, an aha moment to realize that if people can't get to the bus stop, there's food insecurity because they can't get to the grocery store potentially. Now there's ways to get your food delivered, but it was just that moment of like, if I can't get an accessible sidewalk, it impacts many things about my life. So all of us need to be, standing up and thinking about all the barriers that we can continue to break down. All right, well, we are all very aware that Alaska is growing in our senior populations. We are the fastest growing senior population in the nation per capita, and people are needing continued support, but we have a workforce that is challenged and sometimes feels declining. So talking about workforce initiatives, what you individually and your groups are working on to develop workforce and attraction for workforce, or just elements about what living in Alaska needs to look like for people to stay here or to be drawn here. Sir Chelsea.
Well, I will say that our council can speak to this from an aging lens, but as far as the work that we do for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we're really focusing on championing the direct service professional workforce and behavioral health workforce with that, and stabilizing that with wages, training, and different supports of that. And that really aligns with the Trust Workforce Initiative and their current grants. And of course, all the work that we do in advocacy, it aligns with statewide workforce plans, and we really urge multi-agency coordination to reduce any vacancies. Other work that our council aligns with is really just encouraging employers to hire individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities at a living wage. So that's really where our focus would be.
Thanks. So the increasing number of seniors is a major area of focus for the Alaska Mental Health Trust. We're partners with the Commission on Aging, and we just had a presentation to our Board of Trustees in August, just around what the data shows is coming up in the next 10 years. So we're well aware. We feel like the trustees and the board is really educated on this and motivated and passionate about the subject. So we're all in on this. You're right, there aren't enough providers in Alaska for all kinds of things, including taking care of dementia and Alzheimer's related diseases, but also the comorbid conditions that go along with being elderly. So all of that can be a problem. So we, for a long time, supported what's called SHARP, which is basically tuition forgiveness for training if you come and work in Alaska. So that's ongoing. We give dollars directly to those programs. We advocate for self-directed waiver services through Medicaid. We do direct service training programs for staff. We do that every year after year, of all different kinds of training. We advocate for increased use of assistive technology, environmental modifications. We also promote employment first policies, which you were talking about. It's basically returning and engaging people with chronic conditions into the workforce or with disabilities to enter the workforce for the first time. As I said, the Mental Health Trust, of course, focuses a lot on what's your life like? Are you able to live with dignity? Are you able to have a meaningful impact on your community? And being in the workforce has a favorable influence on all of that for the person involved and for their families. So it's a major focus for us as well. Some of our coming up projects for next year include the Alaska Training Cooperative, UAA School Psychology Program to promote the training of mental health professionals, peer support certification programs. Many of you may know this, but peer support is a really effective way of managing a lot of conditions, and we're all in on that as well. Direct support professional training, Alaska Area Health Education Centers, clinical psychology program accreditation. There's a process to get accredited. That's part of why we have a shortage in Alaska. We don't have accredited programs that are in state. So that's our next push. We have occupational students from America, beneficiary employment conferences, Governor's Council for Project Search, and finally the micro enterprise grants, which is something that we promote and fund for someone with an intellectual developmental disability who has an idea for a business. We want to help that business get off the ground. So we do micro enterprise grants. We help figure out if this is viable, help get it started, that sort of thing. So any of you are interested in that, just go to our website. You'll see a lot of information on that. Thanks.
That was very thorough. Wonderful. So just a couple of additions to that. So you heard about DSPs and direct service professionals. The caucus, that is again, the 21 of us have been involved in and were able to advance increases. A couple of years ago, a significant one, I think in excess of $7.5 million maybe, to increase sort of dedicated dollars to increase salaries to make DSP jobs more attractive. Because there are some of them who have this important work caring for an individual with disabilities, and they can make that $16 an hour in retail. We don't want them to do that in industry. One of the things that's helped actually is that the SEIU, Service Something International, has organized a number of these firms, and they are it's effective in getting the pay raises they seek. There have also been legislation we've passed over the last couple of years, not real fresh in my mind, but essentially we're starting the process of allowing, for example, family members to get paid for the work of caring for elderly and disabled in their homes. Otherwise, is the broad scope. So, increasing funding in K through 12, funding for the base student allocation, which we did in part. We've got a long way to go to make 18-year-olds as capable as they can be when they graduate, and continuing to afford things like performance scholarships so that students stay at the University of Alaska and retain their Alaskan citizenship. Efforts are made constantly at technical education and career development. Some of those are made at the school district level. Some of those have not survived cuts in the final analysis. Another thing not mentioned is there is legislation, for example, one example is pharmacists, to afford professionals the opportunity to deliver services at the top of their training level. This is always a little bit, I always perceive, I can be sort of conservative about some of these things with some caution to make sure that, in fact, folks have the skill set that is needed, because weirdly, the legislature is the referee on licensure and credentials and whether new categories should be created or a profession should be allowed to deliver services formally. So those are some of the things.
Okay, thank you. And Andy, also want to give the legislature some credit for a couple of years ago, allocating a significant amount of money to hire through the Department of Health a contractor to analyze Medicaid rates that were being paid to home and community-based providers or hospitals. Our Medicaid funds a lot of things across the state, and a lot of providers were saying it's not enough. I can't continue. I'm in a deficit spending in order to raise the wages of my employees or pay for all of these regulatory expectations. We're going into deficits and we need more dollars. So a contractor was hired. They've been actively working this last year. They've got a lot of feedback. Some of you may have participated in being part of those listening sessions and getting feedback. And I think that study is about to be released that will make recommendations. Now that will probably come back to the legislature and say, well, we need additional money, but there'll be data and some very explicit categories of where we're failing and where we can do better, or where things are being paid at adequate levels. So just know, if you're a DSP in the room, there are a lot of people working to, again, base fees for service on a living wage for the people doing the work, because it can't be done without you. So thank you for all of your work on that. We had a little session yesterday on cybercrime. Boy, it's hitting a lot of seniors and people with disabilities, and it's increasing for everybody, whether it's email, phone, all of things. And just curious if you are involved in any particular initiatives, legislative work, advocacy to address cybercrime and protections for seniors and those with disabilities.
This is not a primary focus of the trust, cybercrime. So we really rely on working with partners on this. And Adult Protective Services, AgNet, or Alaska Commission on Aging. If we hear about any situations, then we run it up the chain. And that's really our extent of our.
Thank you. You took my update from me. I will just echo that our council hasn't listed this as a current priority, not to say it's not important. However, we would love to learn more about this and support initiatives from our partners. If there's any presentation that anyone knows or a training opportunity, please reach out to me. I would love for you to present at our next council meeting so that our council members can be more informed on what resources are in Alaska, and perhaps there's an opportunity for something we can advocate for in there. So let us know if you have training information, or if anyone, online, we'd love to hear more.
I don't have anything to add. It's not really the focus of my office, but do let us know if you have ideas that you'd like us to advance or to edify us and teach us.
Super. We've talked about getting funding for teachers to say, wash your hands and don't click on it. All right. This is more of a federal focus, but sometimes our advocacy focuses on federal things. The Social Security caps, this comes up as a question many years. Social Security caps have remained stagnant for decades. You can only, if you have a disability, have so much money. And it's although, again, it's a federal issue, have you been involved with any initiatives, or are you hearing from advocates that this is a pressure point for them?
I haven't. I mean, this issue comes up, frankly, in presidential elections. So I know that if someone makes $500,000 for Social Security purposes, their taxes that they've made, I think it's $106,000. And so one way to increase the trust would be to increase the tax. And but it's not really a state issue. I'm mostly a spectator watching that issue.
And I would say the same for us. We are, it's not our primary work, but we do try to work with partners to stay informed on the issue, sort of help beneficiaries obtain Social Security disability benefits. We do help work with that through SOAR, Alaska Legal Services, or Disability Law Center programs. So we help direct folks to places where we think they can get the help they need. And then again, we do have gap funding should somebody fall short with a critically important aspect of their life.
Our council does advocate on both the state and federal level. So we have been collaborating for many years with national partners, specifically our National Association for Councils on Developmental Disabilities. I just had to remember the acronym because I didn't write it in my notes. And this is in support of the SSI, Savings Penalty Elimination Act. And this would raise SSI resource limits to $10,000 for a single individual and $20,000 for a couple. And of course, we've been working on this very long time. It comes up every year with our delegation. We're just pushing for these increases. And it really would modernize rules that have been updated since the 80s. So it will let the beneficiaries of SSI save emergency funds or just save for whatever they want to save for. They should have that choice and independence, without losing their SSI and Medicaid benefits. And how we support this, of course, is our relationship with the federal delegation and sharing data and stories with Alaska's delegation and educating families on any related updates. So we're definitely pushing forward and helping to support this change.
Perfect, thank you. Food security often is a significant issue for seniors and those with disabilities, and some of you have talked a little bit about initiatives that we've been working on related to that. Do you want to speak anything more about advocacy for additional supports for people with disabilities and food security?
Sure. So one of our successes, writ large legislature, we were able to add money for child advocacy centers, behavioral health grants, infant learning program, although vetoed by the governor, a restoration of the Volunteers of America program, and some other programs. But one of them, one of the additions was $2.5 million for senior centers. I think they really wanted 3.1 or 3.3. I was a leader in securing the 2.5. The governor did not veto that. These are different, I'm not sure how, but they're different than adult day services. But senior centers hadn't had an increase in some time. They're spread throughout the state. They got $2.5 million. Some of that includes food services, right? So that's why I note that in this question. Meanwhile, there are lots of supporters of food banks in the legislature. They got late FY25 dollars. So when we were taking this up, we learned that they just received $1.5 million. And it was on the list to contribute it in FY26. It didn't make the cut. So that's unfortunate, but it's certainly something we could look at.
And the trust supports food security for our beneficiaries, and so we're actively involved in that. For instance, the expansion of Beans Cafe, I just toured that recently, and not only, of course, were they involved with food security, but they also do a lot of hiring of another group of our beneficiaries, which is people who are exiting the criminal justice system and need work. So we definitely work on that. And we also do home delivery meals for permanent supported housing folks and meal boxes in rural Alaska at times. It was especially active during COVID and is less active now, but that's sort of how we overlap with the food security space.
Food security is not essentially a core program area for our council right now, but we do certainly monitor developments for the SNAP programs and other nutrition programs at both the state and federal level. We want to continue to support ongoing funding for senior nutrition and rural food programs, collaborate with our partners to ensure that older adults and people with disabilities can have access to nutritious meals. But I will say, if there's opportunities for legislation that we can get behind and support alongside you, please let us know. Our council would love to hear more about this.
Great, thank you. I think last year we talked a little bit too about the if this, then that. There are a lot of things that impact the SNAP program. For instance, there was an archaic IT system. So in order to get better delivery of eligibility, you needed to upgrade the IT system. In order to get better snowplowers, you had to have defined benefits for people. So there's a lot of if this, then that goes on to some of the questions that we may have, and understanding the bigger picture can help us be better advocates. It's not going to be an adolescent that says, I can't believe you're doing that to me, without having the whole story and being able to go to the helpers and say, help me understand why this isn't working for me. Help me understand the barrier that I might need to be advocating for. It would help us move things forward. You've all alluded to this a little bit, but the lack of adequate mental health supports in our state has been highlighted over the last decade plus. And as we see increasing need for dementia support across Alaska and those for dually diagnosed, can you expand a little bit on the initiatives that you're working on?
I'll start only because I know that we want to certainly align with the trust and the priorities of the Alaska Mental Health Board. So I don't have any further. I'll pass the line.
Thank you. And I do have a long list of things the trust supports in this area, and I'm just going to highlight some of them. This is again a major area for us to really bear down on and help with. But we did reestablish and funded the facilitation of the Alaska Dementia Action Collaborative. So we're big in on that. We help fund the Hospice of Anchorage, Homer, and Kodiak centers for education around dementia care. Caregiver support program at the Nikitsky Senior Center, which provides social services, group support, case management, and some services to families. We fund the facilitation of the Alaska Dementia Action Collaborative, for the caregiver resource guide, which is huge in terms of knowing directionally where to go if you're a family member or caregiver. Advocated for the BOLD, the BOLD Act grant funding for public health. And coming up next year will be dementia education and prevention through the Division of Public Health, which we're helping fund, and then statewide dementia training project through the UAA Center for Human Development, and we do donate significant dollars to UAA Center for Human Development for that kind of program. We also have many partners in this. Many people care about this in the state of Alaska. So AARP, AgeNet, Division of Public Health, Pioneer Homes, Center for Human Development, Alzheimer's Association, and many others. And again, if you look at our website, you see a big impact around this and where you can connect with folks.
Well, just a couple thoughts here. So I've been frustrated and have noted it in the press that the governor has vetoed as much as he has. One example, unfortunate, was in the current fiscal year budget. We were told the dementia community, sought only, why it was so modest, I'm not sure I can tell you. They sought $100,000 for dementia awareness and education. Well, we can afford that. We spent $100,000 for ratings. It's not a lot of money to the state legislature, even now in tough times. So we funded it, and I put it on my list. And the list I refer to is monies that as read in the conference committee. I was chair of the conference committee. I could sort of secure and guarantee and have the votes for the governor veto. And I don't know why that $100,000 was precious to him, because it's not been needed. It's needed for something else. It just goes back to the general fund. So there's those frustrations. My colleagues in the Senate did not include an increment for adult day services, $1.5 million. A couple of years ago, Dan Ortiz, a former colleague from Michigan, had secured, I think, $2 million in adult day services. The governor vetoed that. So we have these other obstacles. Now, the question as presented included dual diagnoses. Volunteers of America, I've noted, we secured about a year ago or more, 18 months ago, a $2.2 million two-year grant so that they could do coordinated care, including psychiatric care at their ARCH facility in Highland Road in Eagle River. And the governor did not veto that. It's wonderful. Well, the Senate, as I say, God bless them, made it known that they wanted to get rid of year 2. Well, this was intolerable to me, because if you've ever won something, you sort of want to hold the win, right? You don't want to relinquish it. So that one in the basket is something I had to have. And the governor, for a second time, did not veto the volunteer diagnosis money. So sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, and we're going to keep trying.
Thank you. You may or may not be able to speak to this, but the current freeze and regulations has prevented forward motion for host homes, which you talked about would allow family members to care for their loved ones. And I didn't know if there was any advocacy conversations going on amongst this group to potentially address that freeze and regulation and moving that forward.
Yeah, we're an active partner with the Department of Health and Family and Community Services to advocate for regulations that open up a care continuum for our beneficiaries, including this group. You know, in adult host homes, they're an alternative to institutional care. And in circumstances where it's appropriate, they would be beneficial. We don't lobby for things. The trust is not a lobbying group, but we advocate for the things that our partners advocate for and believe are important. And this is one of those programs, really the least restrictive environment for a person with a condition that is closest to home. It's one of the trust principles. And we try to advocate for those services as much as we can. And this is certainly an area where we can improve.
The question is about regulations, and particular, but I would just go back to, it's always great news when you see, for example, the governor through his Department of Health introducing the bill we talked about earlier this morning, the Complex Care Residential Home Bill, House Bill 73, Senate Bill 76. That bill passed the House, I think, with great ease. And partly because it was the governor's bill, and it was completely inoffensive. That is, who would want this? And it's in, I think, the Senate Finance Committee, so it's making real progress. That bill's not likely to be vetoed because the governor wants it. It's his bill. And this is, we think, a productive step forward in keeping people in their homes and offering them new category of care where the care isn't super intensive, but it's more than just, for example, a regular group home. It captures that cohort. And so this is the kind of effort we're making with the government.
So in regards to the regulatory freeze, that came at the same time as both the hiring freeze and the travel freeze for the state of Alaska. So that has had a couple different impacts on our council and how it operates as a whole, which a moment of levity, travel freeze, which is why you have me today instead of my boss. So. But I'll just say, as far as the host home, the adult host home, that was signed in July of 2023. So there was certainly a delay on regulation, and that only extends now because of the regulatory freeze. And I can just say that we're engaged with partners to navigate this pause on regulations, and that was announced in May, and ensure that the core of home and community-based services don't stall. That those innovations don't stall. So we know that Senior Disability Services is working as hard as they can on interim steps under the existing waiver authority while those rules are pending. And we don't have any new updates at this time, but we're hoping all of these freezes are lifted. Great, thank you. And for those of you that may don't know, host home, what is that? It originated from someone advocating to the governor who was doing foster care. And as the youth was transitioning into adulthood, they didn't want to have them have to move out and go somewhere else. They wanted to be able to provide continuing support, but they didn't want to license their home as an assisted living home. So that was the origination of that advocacy. Then it expanded because then people were advocating to say, well, but it may be in rural Alaska, I'm taking care of my grandma who has the dementia, but I can't work because I need to do that. So creating a path of licensure that was non-habilitative, so it didn't come with a lot of complexity, but allowed a form of payment to care for an elder or for a parent to be able to care for a child with disability and still have some income coming in. So it's a very righteous opportunity for people to get continued support, and we just need to go through the steps of advocacy for regulations. So this afternoon, we're going to be doing like the next step of how you advocate that. If that's an issue that's important to you, you could hold that as a potential advocacy point. All right, are there any other initiatives that you wanted to specifically talk about that you're working on? You've shared a lot of busy people at this table that wanted to give you an opportunity to share other things that you may be working on.
Well, there are all sorts of things I'm working on for sure. Some of them don't involve health policy. So I have my own sponsored bill that involves myriads of things, wildlife management, labor compliance issues, workers' compensation, the sort of things. But just know that if you or your colleagues come to Juneau, or you want to set up time here in Anchorage over the next 2.5 months, I listen really hard, and we have, I call it the magic board. It's a whiteboard. Put it on the whiteboard. So we have a list of sort of compassionate items where we want to help Alaskans. And, you know, I get pushback saying, well, we can't afford that. The Senate doesn't want it. And I play dumb. And, you know, what? I didn't hear you. And so, you know, I was told, and you can't have all these ads. Well, as I said, we got ads for child advocacy centers, senior centers, behavioral health grants. Infant Learning Program, Volunteers for America, Deaf Navigator, Dementia Education. And we just ignore the naysayers and push. And sometimes things sort of happen magically. And so I'm here for you. Sometimes it's competitive, for sure. But we're going to do everything we can. And I appreciate your work.
Thanks. And I want to just thank Representative Joseph. He's such a good partner to the people of Alaska and the trust, and also Chelsea for working with us so closely. It's just a pleasure for me as a new person to learn about all the great people, and including everyone in this room who has made the choice to do the work you do to help the people that you help. The one other thing I wanted to mention is that the mobile response crisis team for behavioral health is something that's been going on for 6 or 7 years. That Trust in partnership with many others sort of drives that train, helps drive that train. So anyone who's in crisis in public, our desire is that that person would get the help they need, the mental health help they need, and not have to be incarcerated or go to an emergency room or be hospitalized when that is not the most appropriate outcome for them. So we're working in many communities across the state, but any input you have from your observations, from what you know, where you are, please just let us know how we can do our work better, what's needed, and where we can go from here. We just looked at some data this morning from Fairbanks, for example, 85% reduction in jail time for folks that were in crisis in public, that type of thing, because there's some other choice for them when they're met where they need to be. So keep us informed on that, and that work continues. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take this time to speak a little on some of our upcoming legislative priorities. So primarily what we do is advocacy. So if you're taking notes, so SB 178 is our initiative to expand early intervention. That is primarily on the infant learning program. So this had extreme support in the legislation. We thank the legislation for Josephson for the support of this. It was a large funding request for an infant learning program. It did get legislative support. Ultimately, it was vetoed. So we're coming back again. Hopefully this time it'll win. Additionally, there is the Special Education Service Agency, which is CESA. They're asking for a very moderate increase to their funding formula, and that allows them to provide special education services in rural Alaska and support our partners at the Department of Education. I mentioned before already HB 26 and also the complex care residential home bills. And also important is HB 39 with companion bill, Senate Bill 8, which is education for deaf and hard of hearing. And then new this past session was House Bill 141, which is on universal changing facilities. And our council's very excited about this initiative. And it would require a universal changing table in state-owned buildings. So we're working very hard to get that rolling. Our council wants to extend the gratitude to legislative sponsors who have helped advance our priorities. And I mentioned some already, but Representative Mina for HB 26, I know you mentioned that as well, and then Representative Carrick for HB 141. And we also thank our partners at the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority for funding an upcoming grant program, the Universal Changing Facility Grant Program, which will be starting next summer. And that will target getting universal changing tables installed in privately owned businesses or nonprofits. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach where we're working on HB 141, getting tables in state-owned facilities, and then also providing funding or some sort of funding supports to get universal changing tables in other buildings across Alaska. So we're very excited about the initiative. Beyond legislation, we'll continue to work alongside our partners statewide and federally on workforce housing, independent living initiatives that allow Alaskans to have choice. That is a big part of what we do. Choice, independence, and dignity in their communities. So thank you so much.
Thank you, all of you. How many of you went to the fair this summer? Did you see the new Universal changing station in the Purple Gate? If you come in the Purple Gate, the restaurant right there. And that was just, you know, it was, I don't know the backstory exactly, but I was told that the executive director of the fair was hearing that people with disabilities were having to leave the fair because they had no place to refresh it. And that shifted the trajectory, and they built that. And again, the power of stories, the power of advocacy. You've got one mom with one son who's changing the world, and we have a changing station at the airport now as a result. But I thought maybe it would be helpful, Andy, if you, for all of us, because one of my goals is to have legislative literacy and people understanding. Chelsea talked about we have a champion for this particular bill. Could you just talk about once a bill, a legislator takes on a bill, then where does that bill go?
Sure. So, in some respects, filing a bill can be fairly easy, in some respects not. So you have to have a concept. Sometimes that requires looking at other states. You have to master the concept. So you've got to be an expert on that thing. And your staff, or at least one of them, has to be an expert. As if you're preparing for a final exam, sort of that kind of expertise. You prepare a PowerPoint. You file the bill. The bill gets referred to 2 or 3 committees, sometimes more, sometimes less. If you're in the majority, the speaker, sort of cultural, is going to treat your bill somewhat more favorably. That is, you might have fewer committees of referral. You then have to ask the chair of the committee you've been assigned to for calendaring. That requires a packet. And then you've got to gear up and go to that hearing. You may have invited testimonies of experts in the field who testified, like your public testimony. You hope there's an opportunity for members of the committee to amend the bill. The bill then, God willing, moves out of that committee to the next committee of referral. So it's quite a process. Interestingly, if the legislature is really eager to pass a bill into law, you can do it by waiving rules and various tricks in like 4 or 5 days. But otherwise, it could take 2 sessions if you're lucky. The bill then advances to the House floor. You've got to get sufficient support. So rather than going to the House floor and having a debate, and sometimes maybe you even are prepared to lose the debate. That is, you don't secure 21 votes on the House floor. Maybe you get 19, but you have a heck of a debate, and you educate the public through the media about this important issue. The system doesn't like that. It likes people to win and not consume time if they're not going to win. So you have to convince leadership, the House Rules Chair, that you're going to carry the day. You've got to make sure everyone's healthy and they're on the floor. They're not gone to the family emergency, etc. The bill then goes to the Senate, goes through the same process. And if it's unchanged, then you've effectively made a law subject to a governor's veto. So, real fast, as one illustration, there was a bill that said, from my colleague Calvin Shruggy, that said that in an emergency, if a operational canine, a dog that works with first responders, German Shepherds or whatever, is injured, they can treat that dog right on the scene because it's an emergency. Well, seems reasonable enough to me. Some veterinarians didn't like the bill. I'm sure they had some good reasons. Governor vetoed it. So there was a bill that passed like 57-3, right? Because there's 60 of us total. Governor vetoed it. So it's making a bill into law is tricky, but that's the process. If you and your colleagues and your friends and loved ones inundate legislators and say, I gotta have House Bill 26, we gotta have the special education assistance grants increased, that is super effective. It's not a guarantee, but what'll happen is if 15 of you write legislators and say, I gotta have House Bill 41 on universal changing stations, legislators will start to walk around with their eyes all aglow and they feel like they got 30 emails, but they got 15. But 15 feels like 30, I say. And it can be very effective. And the subject of conversation in the hallway. So that's the process. I hope I wasn't too long.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Hopefully it was helpful for all of you. All right, we have a few minutes open for questions. If anybody had any additional questions they would like to ask any of the panelists. We can start in the back and forward.
Yes, yes. My name is Penny Calendar, and Sean sure knows me. The direction was to the panel. I am disabled, and I get money from the state. I only get $100 a month. $100 a month, and the cost of food has gone up. Even to buy hair dye, $30 a month. Cost of shampoo, cost of favorite products, food, everything has gone up. But you have to have $100 stretch the whole entire month. But other states were free. They get food stamps. They get over $100 a month for living. Why is Alaska still having us and others like us, like senior citizens, only getting $100 a month? This just I just put that out to you, and what can be done to change it? Because it has been on for years, years and years.
Well, thank you for the question. It almost sounds like the senior grants, not a disability grant, because those are in the range of 100 to 250, depending on need. If it is that kind of grant, and for seniors of any group, there are efforts, and I know Scott Kawasaki, Senator from Fairbanks, to adjust those and make inflation adjustments. I think the governor has vetoed historically in his 7 years some senior grants as well. So there's those challenges, but yeah, there used to be this longevity bonus that was ended by Governor Murkowski, our senator's father, in the early aughts, and replaced with this much more modest system. But if it's not the grant it is, then it falls into that category that I've been talking about all morning, which is if I get emails and information, maybe there's a lobbyist, not required, you call me, we meet at Anchorage, we meet at Juneau, we can make adjustments to these numbers. And sometimes the adjustments, for example, CISA is a statute. And some people will say, oh, it's fixed in statute, you've got to change the statute first, then increase it in the budget. Well, that's not really required. It's probably a good idea. It's actually a very good idea. But we make increases all the time in the senior centers is one example.
I'll just add to that. I think, and I don't want to speak for all the panelists, but a lot of the work that we do is more statewide advocacy work. I know we do have representatives here from an ADRC. Is anyone here from ADRC? Raise your hand. Maybe, okay. Get you connected with them because they'll be able to help you get resources and maybe additional individual resources for funding that might be able to give you some more help right now. I know a lot of the work that we do is long and drawn out. It takes years to make change. And there's people here who might be able to get you additional resources today.
Hi there, my name is Richard. I'm with Disability Advocates, and I'm on food stamps. And last year, I got my food stamps approved for close to 5 months. No, 4 months actually. And thankfully, I went and contacted Andy Gibson's office, who was my representative, and they took care of it pretty quickly. And I got a call from the publicist's office pretty quickly within the first day, and they got handled within about a week. But I'm worried that with January coming up, my recertification, that'll happen again. I ended up going and getting about $2,500 in debt and it collected interest, unfortunately. And I don't want that happening again. Because I couldn't afford food. And I don't really know exactly what they're doing to prevent that this time around.
Richard, it's good to see you. So the governor about 2 years ago cut what are called eligibility technicians by about 100. Some of those have been restored. We're trying to enhance aged archaic computer systems. But fundamentally, there's this 23% error rate. Again, with thanks to Senator Murkowski, we sort of got rewarded for having a higher error rate, which is sort of counterintuitive, right? You should be disciplined for having a higher error rate, but it's helpful. But we can't do this forever. They want our error rate down to 6% of staff. If we don't get that, then we're going to pay more out of our own general fund administrative costs to implement the program. So the Department of Health, which administers it, is very aware of this, and it's all hands on deck, and we're going to do everything we can to make food stamps function better and more efficient.
Did you still have a question up here?
It's Joe Fisher. I live at your home, and I'm sorry to have this blue mark. I have a person had dementia. I was minding my own business, and he came and whacked me, and I didn't know he was behind me until I looked over, and here he is running. And none of the nurses they did not help. And because they are not the nurses are, the assistant nurses are from the Philippines, some other country, and they do not help that because they don't like to be involved with that kind of stuff. So I'm at the higher home meeting for people with disability because these nurses assistants we don't have. Another thing, we only have we don't have a normal nurse on graveyard, and the other ones are 3 of them, and there's too much work on graveyard, and they never around because we don't have enough staff. How could we get a bill, get it to the governor, and see if we can get more help in the fire home? All 7 fire homes are hurting, no staff, and all we get is, oh yeah, send them to a anchor. Now we overflow, and we don't have enough staff working anywhere in the fire home.
Thanks, and I didn't hear what community you were in. Is it Anchorage? In Anchorage, okay. Yeah, thanks for that feedback. And you highlight, I think, something that we talked about earlier up here, which is staffing shortages, staffing training, and then just safe facilities for folks who are struggling at that moment in time. So I'm glad you highlighted it. You heard some of the work that we're doing together around that. I'm sorry you had that experience. That's rough. Our goal would be to have that be vanishingly rare for both for you and for the folks that are suffering in the facilities. So thanks for the remarks.
Well, one thing that jumps to mind is the long-term care ombudsman. So if there's complaints of that nature, that's what that office, not that I know much about it, is there for. But in terms of workforce, Chelsea mentioned this, or maybe Michelle, that we're trying to enhance pensions because we're the only state virtually without them. These are traditional pensions, sort of 20th century versions. And so there's active efforts on that. It's House Bill 78. It got through the House. It will potentially get through the Senate. We don't know the governor's position. But it's basically designed to make it so that public employees want to stick around. That's the goal. And then can live in comfortably in retirement.
Hi, my name is Tao, and it's my first time at this summit. And I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for you guys for putting this together. I have a question for Chelsea. When you first started talking, you talked about the shortage of Medicaid providers and contractors. And you said that we would have more money in the budget for it.
I will do my best to answer that. So that is related to the environmental modification program. So if there is a Medicaid recipient who needs a modification to their home to be able to stay in their home and maintain independence there, there's a program, the EMOD or Environmental Modification Program, that allow them to get funding to pay for those modifications at their home so that they don't have to go to a different home or move out of their communities and help them stay there. But my understanding is that's been very difficult to fully utilize those funds because of the lack of contractors and then also a delay in payment for the contractors, which is why the contractors are hesitant to take those jobs. I know that there's different agencies that are working to support that, but the work that our council did was really highlighting the increase in that cap, because before it just wasn't enough when you think about the cost of getting goods and resources to different areas of Alaska. It was barely enough to even pay for the materials, let alone labor for those contractors. So we want to make this type of work more attractive for contractors, and then also relieve those burdens to essentially make sure that they're going to get paid timely, so they'll want to take this work on. Any other questions? Follow-up questions? And she's got the microphone.
I'm not sure which one of you mentioned it, but you talked about the living wage. So in your opinions, what is a living wage in America, in Alaska?
I just had cause to look at this in the last week. I think it's $27 an hour, something like that. For a rental, may just be 2 bedrooms. So a lot of people don't make a living wage.
Questions in the back?
I have heard somebody, was it you, Jill, that you said something about the SOAR to help with SSI or SS disability. That program is not working anymore. Did they replace it with something to get that help with filling out for clients and stuff?
Yeah, we were talking about the Social Security cap. So I will give that feedback back to the folks that we work with at the trust, okay? Thanks, and we'll find out what's going on and try to help with that.
This joke is the last winter, we had a wheelchair tip over by the city market, and I had to run. My friend named Ben had a car here because the sidewalk is a big plowed, and we have many people walking on the road. Pearl has to go get coffee at the dining at Rams Bakery, and I could tell you it's hard, and I asked for her. She's 86 years old, and S26. Could I help get that bill and have that signed here next year?
Thanks for that question, Joe. Let me make sure I understand. Was there an issue with the sidewalk? Yeah. I think there might be a representative here today that's for like an Anchorage accessibility group. Is that correct? Anyone who works on accessibility in Anchorage? That's the man you want to talk to. He can help you and essentially like help to get those accessibility modifications made, especially on sidewalks and in the local community. That's who you want to talk to. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. But Ricky's running.
Dr. Wilson, you talked about the micro business grant. Just a little bit more, what it entails, like what type of business?
The micro business grants? Yeah, so these are awarded to some of our beneficiaries who want to start a business, like I said. I had Allison here. Do you have an example of some of the businesses that might, because she knows them intimately?
Yeah, the micro enterprise grant program. So if you go to the trust website, you can find information about this. The next deadline, I believe, is March. It's in March. It might be March 15th. These are administered through the University of Alaska Anchorage Center for Human Development, and they are for businesses. I believe a micro enterprise is under $35,000. There might be some folks in the university here who probably provide a little bit more detail, but the types of businesses we've supported in the past have ranged greatly from individual artists to hair salons to lawn service agencies, all sorts of things. So I would encourage you to take a look. It's a really great program, and it's to help grow or start a small business. Thanks, Allison.
Great. Well, I want to give Chelsea the mic just to give some overview of how the Governor's Council works.
Thanks so much. Since we have some extra time, I want to provide an example for how you could be engaged with our council to create, and then it would then go to a legislative process. So we had an example last session that is exactly how our council should work. So there is a mom locally who she had a story about her son at the Anchorage airport, where she had to change him on the bathroom floor of the Anchorage airport. She brought that story to the Anchorage airport, and then she also brought that story to our council. She went on online public notices. She came to the committee that I staff, which is the Community Inclusion Supports and Services Committee, and she told her story there. I got council approval. They said, yes, run. And I started working on some of the processes to bring this to when we went to Juneau in February. And I brought forth a packet to the legislators we met with, and that included history on the bill, why it's on the potential bill, why it would be important. And then I even drafted language. So I handed them a bill and said, hey, make this real. And we're really excited when it was picked up, and now it is HB 141. And it all started with a mom who had a story that was important, and she brought it to us, and then we took action. And now, thanks to the trust, we have additional grant funding to make this happen in the private sector as well. So that right there, I want to encourage you all, if you have something that ignites your fire, really is important to you, come to our committees, come to our council meetings. We want to see what we can create together, and we want to take those to Juneau with us and make real impactful change for Alaskans. So I just wanted to share that. Also, I'm super excited about this bill.
That's great. Well, thank you all for participating. You can see again, these are the helpers. When you have a moment of despair, you're like, I'm so frustrated and I need help. Here's three wonderful people with wonderful organizations and service that can help you. And this is a good time of year to reach out to a legislator, although I don't know if there's ever a good time when you don't stop moving. But before session starts in January, to invite your legislator over, come for coffee, come see my home where I live, come see me at my work, see how the money that you allocate is utilized, or a parent to come over and see what I'm dealing with. It's really helpful, and they're always very open to do that. And the trust, always wonderful partners. You can contact a program officer and just pitch an idea, just bubble and share ideas. And the council's also very open, as you've seen today. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all, panelists. We really appreciate your time and all the work that you do throughout the year. It's really helpful. Thanks. think there's a lunch break now, right? There's a food truck in the back.
There it is.
So high five, hand five in the back.
I highly recommend the pesto manifesto. It's very delicious. They also have some smothered waffle fries and a couple other things that are very delicious. Other than that, if you are looking for a place to lunch, there
I think I
are
saw you.
Arby's and McDonald's, and then a couple of places down the hill into the shopping center. So we will break for lunch and then
Outside. Yep. Art area. Yep. Yeah. I mean.
and then we return at 1 o'clock for our next
Okay, okay. Not a good weather,
presentation. Thank you very much.
weather situation. Okay. Hey, did you get the codes that we did? And how would I access that? So, it's gonna be saved,
We're actually posting it on my YouTube, on special, it's the last week's YouTube page.
so it's Special Olympics Alaska YouTube.
Yep, you just look at Special Olympics last.
But if you're accessing it from a government,
Yeah.
you won't get it. Maybe on YouTube, but yeah, the Special Olympics is walked through any of the state and government and university.
I did not know that.
I can't, maybe you're reading it as.
I did not know that.
But I can't get.
One of the professors I work with, she was at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you should.
Actually,
Have you used your personal computer or the? Yeah, I cannot get through it.
Oh, wow.
Like, I had to look it up. Yep, I had to look it up on my phone.
You think that they would allow it though for